welcome to 4020 live. Johnny's waving. Billy's here as well. I'm in a little box. They can't see me, so they don't know I'm not wearing anything, but don't tell them. Welcome to the program live.
It's a lunchtime as well.
I'm doing my best impression of Scotty because everyone keeps asking us still, where is he? And
he just tried ringing me. I put him off.
I keep saying, he's not here, but they don't listen. So
I got a nice voicemail from him the other day, which I could play, which is quite comedic.
Is it broadcastable?
Is the word bastard allowed to be broadcast? Or Aussie bastard? Is that okay?
Yeah, go on.
Was that anything to do with Manly?
No, not indeed. No.
I mean, we do miss him. He will be back when we can, get a feed through to his house, which currently, of course, we're unable to do so.
Well, with the increase in restrictions that we're all going to be getting, who knows?
I mean, it's strange, isn't it? We're I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
You could be a politician then.
I mean, we could say absolutely anything these days, and no one's got a clue as to what's going on. I mean, I certainly don't. I'm trying to fix this stream so people can watch us talking about Rugby League. Get in touch on Twitter. Loads of you have over the past 24 hours about the big issues, which we will talk about, and all the matches as well. Maybe for a change, we should actually speak about the matches, first ones, because excitedly, we had an exciting weekend of Rugby League, including a great win for Warrington over St Helens, especially one which we, of course, all went for St Helens last week, upsetting the fans of Warrington. So we all went for Saints, and they won in a very entertaining game on the telly.
I'm assuming that when you said we had an exciting weekend of Rugby League, you're not including Thursday's game.
What game? Exactly.
So you're not including it. I think it's really nice to be on something called Titch as well. I think that suits me, clearly. The Warrington Saints game was everything that's great about Rugby League, as indeed was Salford Catalans. The difference between the two teams for the Saints game was a headed ball and a wonderful try-saving tackle. Other than that, very, very little, to choose between them. Both played at great high intensity. Full credit again to Warrington for finding a game plan to knock Saints off their stride, just like they did at Wembley last year. They dictated the tempo of the game. Their online defence was fantastic. They could have been swept away early on and weren't. Fought fire with fire when it was necessary. Anthony Gelling's head proved to be the difference in terms of the scoreboard, and Blake Austin's unbelievable try-saving tackle probably won them the game. But Warrington clearly are not going to give up this cup without a fight. They are the form team now officially since the resumption. And nothing but credit for them. And again, if there are two teams on the field and you're asked to pick one, and you go with the team that you think is perhaps the one that has enough in their armoury to win it, and they don't, I don't think that's probably worthy of lambasting. That just shows that at the moment they take each game on its merit. I'm very, very impressed with the Wolves, and I think they'll go some way to retaining their trophy if we can look that far ahead.
Can we look that far ahead, John? Are they going to be there at a exciting Wembley Stadium, perhaps with no one there, lifting the Challenge Cup again?
I think they're a very good chance, as Phil said. Great performance, and they've been in terrific form since lockdown ended, and they really seem to be the bogey team for St Helens. They've knocked them out and beaten them in quite a few games, big games in the last couple of years. They really lift when they come up against St Helens. So it's a great rivalry that's been built the last couple of years. And I guess if you're St Helens, you probably don't want to face them in a grand final or a semi-final come the end of the year.
Is that an official falcon? Or does that not count as a falcon from
I think that's a definite falcon. Yeah, anytime the ball hits the head, unintentionally, it's a Mario Fenech ode. But you don't see many falcons that are actually tries, do you? So it was a bit of an odd one, wasn't it?
Everyone loves the header fall. Saints do the famous one, and then it got banned or something.
John Harrison against Sheffield, I believe, and that was a ploy dreamed up by Brian McLennan's father when he was coach at St Helens. Mike, I think he realised he had a guy in his team who was it just not far short of 7 foot, and came up. Read through the rules, came up with something whereby you couldn't legislate against it, and he deliberately knocked the ball forward with his head, and then it was grounded. I think they changed it so that clearly you couldn't do that as a deliberate act, but the coming off the head doesn't count as a knock on or going forward. And to be fair to Josh Charnley, played to the whistle. And Gelling was good throughout the game and caused loads of problems on that side for St Helens. But it was just a wonderful game. It was a great exposure on BBC One. I just think, again, I don't know what you think, and it's going slightly off topic, but anybody else getting fed up with the fake crowd noise on televised games at the moment? I mean, we've got to the point where we're sort of a month down the line and we know there is no one in the stadium. Sadly, the restrictions that are going to be imposed from later tonight, and I suspect that we'll have to talk about the implications of that, mean that we may not get fans even in the stadium again for the remainder of this season. Except perhaps in France, does that mean that we can drop this pretense? I see even on the soccer now on Sky, you've got the choice of either having the fake crowd or not having the fake crowd, and there's something a bit more pure about hearing the collisions, hearing the players shouting to themselves rather than do you want to hear Old Faithful when Hull are 30 points down? Probably not.
Especially not the cowbell. I know Sid, our resident Hull KR fan on Twitter, glad to be away from the cowbell, but then they stick it on the coverage. Obviously, in Australia, you've got actual crowds there now, John, and maybe even bigger for the grand final. But they pioneered this crowd noise, so we can blame Fox or whoever. Are you a fan?
I do actually like the fake crowd noise because it's quite soulless. It does seem like a pre-season game or a friendly or a training run without it. So I am actually a fan of the fake crowd noise.
So 1-1 on that one. I prefer it when you can hear the players swear and they have to apologise. It's quite funny. I don't know why they get upset about it. It's not as if it hasn't happened a million times before, but there you go. Warrington able to win games, close games. I mean, obviously they beat Castleford late on a couple of weeks ago, and now this win over St Helens, although it was Saints who scored late to try and get back into this one. Maybe, as we discussed last week, it could be their year, even if there is no one at Old Trafford to see it.
Yeah, I think the balance of the side's right. I don't know what they do when Gareth Widdop is back fit, because at the moment it seems to be working with Matty Ashton in the starting lineup. But the big game players came to the fore. I just think that there's clearly a confidence about the way that they're playing at the moment, and they've bought into the idea that you've got to be really tough defensively, but use the ball if you've got the outlets when you can. And again, a lot of it, extrapolating form lines at the moment is so difficult when we are going to have greater injuries, more games, which we're worth coming on to later. And clearly, the effects of a disease that can affect a club at very short notice, just as they're about to take the field. So, drawing too many conclusions from a week-to-week basis is probably not easy, other than the fact that there's something within this Warrington DNA at the moment that is making them incredibly difficult to beat. And I think that was a landmark win for them against Saints, because they were a team that I thought had the armoury to trouble anybody, and to nullify them to the extent that it was, up until the last 10 minutes, you just felt that Warrington had a deal of control in the game that Saints never quite did, was absolutely admirable, which will make some of our pro-Warrington fans fall off their seat.
Warrington are through, as are Wigan, who Hull FC. It's almost too cliche now to call them a Jekyll and Hyde side, John, but they showed very little in that game, and Wigan, very professional performance. And well, I don't want to say it was easy, but 26-0 at half time, that was done.
It was easy. Yeah, it was too easy. I think they've been, underperforming for quite a while, not only this season, but last as well. And you kind of think what are the problems and the issues there? Obviously, they've got a new coach, but not much seems to have changed. And for Wigan, it was terrific performance. They looked outstanding. They've got a lot of attacking weapons there. Sean O'Loughlin back just gives them another option. And Liam Farrell, he's having a brilliant season. He's got to be one of the form players in Super League this year, I would say.
Thought O'Loughlin was magnificent coming back. I mean, considering he hasn't played at all this year, the influence that he had in the middle of the field for the first 20-25 minutes when the game was effectively won and lost was absolutely sensational. You can see why he's so highly regarded throughout the game, but particularly at that club, why they will try their absolute hardest to get him to do another year if his body will allow him to, on the basis of the fact that clearly he hasn't been able to play a lot of rugby this season, which may extend beyond into next year. Thought, clearly Bevan French is an enormous threat if you give him the time and the space. And Sam Powell on his 200th appearance, again, is the glue, like Thomas Uluwai is when he's out there, that keeps the team together. They look very well balanced, great threat. The worry for Hull is that the issues that everybody's talked about for an awfully long time just come home to roost. Again, what is the answer to their halfback conundrum? It clearly isn't Jake Connor at the moment, even though they've given him the number 6 shirt. Did they recruit to play a certain way? And obviously the conditions and the rule changes mean that that's already slightly outmoded. I don't know. I think they need to decide, a bit like Huddersfield, what they want to be. Do they want to bring in someone from outside and change the basic way of playing again, or do they want to commit long term to a coach and a philosophy and build around that? And I think they're just at a halfway house at the moment, unfortunately, Hull, and I'm not sure, where they go from here, because clearly I think they're going to struggle to make the top 4, and that effectively is the end of the season, and it's finished again with a little bit of a whimper.
Isn't the problem for Hull, though, the fact that we've been saying this for years and years and years now, and they don't seem to be able to. I know they won back-to-back Challenge Cups or whatever, but if the yardstick is the Super League, and as much as we can say Warrington, it's always their year. At least they've made multiple grand finals. Hull made one, which is now 14 years ago, and haven't really been close since.
Yeah, I think they've gone backwards from that back-to-back Challenge Cup winning season, and they were in the top 4. Both, I think they were one game from the grand final both of those seasons, and they've definitely gone backwards from there. They've dropped off from the pack, so yeah, it's a tough time because they have, they've spent a lot of money on players, they've recruited well. You look at that squad and you think the talent's there, but there's just something not working. So whether it takes an outside voice and set of ideas to come in, much like Justin Holbrook did at St Helens when how poorly they were performing under Kieran Cunningham, and he kind of revolutionised things there. Maybe that's what they need, an outsider.
No Hull and no Hull KR in the semi-finals, because they lost to Leeds as expected, 48-18, 13-0 up at half-time. So again, game over by half-time, Phil, and a good performance from the Rhinos. Yeah,
started off with great intensity. First 20 minutes possibly as good as they've played this year, in not making mistakes, in dictating the tempo of the ruck, in having a lot of players making a significant contribution in that early stage of the game to effectively blow their opposition away. They looked impressive. I think Robert Louis clearly is, and Reece Martin, that right-hand side looked fit and threatening. I think Harry Newman again showed us glimpses of the potential that we think he's got to, make an impact at the international level, perhaps. And no doubt we'll talk about World Cup tickets going on sale, and that he is an outside chance of being part of that England squad, I would say. And I think the other thing that I thought was really interesting from a Leeds point of view was the form of Cruz Leeming. He's only played half a dozen games for the club. He missed a fairly sizable chunk of the pre-season because of an injury. He's only just getting to know his new teammates and the angle of running and the style that they play at. And I think that was his best performance. He was excellent. And from a Leeds point of view, they ended the game with a lot of the next generation on the field. And they could be proud of themselves. There was even talk afterwards that perhaps Liam Sutcliffe is now deciding that his future isn't away from Headingley, and that may well be to do with the fact that other clubs that would have been interested in him going to struggle to come up with a transfer fee in the current economic climate. But he looked comfortable in there as well, and a lot of harmony about the team. Hull KR, I think, just were unfortunately victims of the previous 3 games. They played St Helens twice and Wigan, and that would stretch any squad. One that is young, a little bit inexperienced, had played incredibly well in those 3 games, particularly in 2 of them. It's very, very hard to keep getting to that level every single week when you're not used to it. And of course, we're missing Jordan Abdul, and he has been one of the keys to getting him around the field in those games. So you say it probably wasn't a surprise. I think the ease of victory probably was, but that from where I was sitting, it was just down to Leeds' dominance, particularly the speed of the ruck. Absolutely blew Rovers away in the early stages.
Yeah, John, I almost don't want to keep. It's almost like patronising Hull KR, going, they're playing so nice rugby and blah 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 blah. But you've got to give the credit to Leeds because they stopped them doing that.
Yeah, they were quite dominant. They were really eye-catching, Leeds, as Phil said. I thought the speed of the ruck that Hull KR couldn't keep up with, and they just really buoyed them in the middle of the field. And then, off the back of that, Luke Gale was very, very good. I think Hull KR, it's a kind of an interesting season for them with no relegation. They picked up a couple more injuries, and it seems like they've got quite a mounting injury count at the moment. So it's going to be hard to, I think, back up week in, week out and try and play that style that they want to. So it's going to be interesting how Leeds can perform the rest of the season, because I think that the raw materials are there to make a semi-final run. They just need to do it.
And completing the semi-finals in the Challenge Cup, Salford Red Devils beating Catalan Dragons with a golden try from Dan Sargentson. As I speculated on Twitter, probably saw Christian Inu's drop goal attempts and decided to go for a try instead. And Catalan's dreams of going back to Wembley are over, but Salford, well, having made the grand final last year, Phil, they could be going to Wembley this year. Yeah,
I think that's what we said last week when we were previewing it. That experience of getting to a major occasion will have done Salford a power of good. And coming from 12-0 down showed a great amount of resilience. It looked early on as though the Dragons were going to have it all their own way, that, having played so well against Wigan, that they were carrying that form into the match and they were going to dominate it. But the way in which I think probably Salford clawed their way back into it, and their goal line defence in the stage where they could have been swept away was possibly what even won them the game. It was absolutely admirable. I just thought Salford were brilliant. Absolutely. In some respects, I was disappointed with Catalan, because when they were in charge, they almost became inhibited and played within themselves. When I thought, perhaps now is the time to sort of express yourself a little bit and ram home the advantage that you've got. But for some reason, I don't know why, they decided to play a little conservatively, which for me always goes against that Gallic philosophy that I think they should come with. And Salford not only took advantage, but actually, by the end were clear winners, even though it took them until, got golden try at extra time. I also thought Callum Watkins on his return was excellent. He looked in physically good condition, which is to his credit, because again, he hasn't been around the club for a very long time with what happened at Toronto. But also defensively, I thought he made a massive contribution. A couple of really important tackles that kept them in the game, and he could be a real asset for them. I think they played with no fear, in the same manner that they're coached, and it worked for them. And it just really was. If you were a neutral, that was a fantastic cup tie. Had absolutely everything.
What did you think of it, John? Obviously, a very good performance from Salford Catalans, as Phil said, will be disappointed.
Yeah, I agree with. Unfortunately, I agree with everything Phil said. I thought 12-0. You'd think Catalans, their form of late, not against Wigan, but more recently, you'd think this could be a pretty one-sided game. But Salford just fought their way back in, and they deserved to win. It was a fantastic ending. I mean, that play to set up the try, you can see Sam Tompkins racing off the line to shut down the field goal, and the shift to the left. Sargentson celebrating before he scores the try is always good, and putting it down between the posts to help the conversion that didn't matter. I think it was a win. I think it was a win for the neutrals. And I think Salford are probably a few people's second team after what they did last year. But again, at Catalans, you just kind of think, what's going on there? Because they've got a squad they should be a top 4 team. And they were very poor against Wigan at home in front of their own crowd, which these days playing in front of your own crowd is like manna from heaven. But yeah, congrats to Salford, and good to see Ian Watson remembering to mask up and not hug his conditioner in celebration.
Would have been a perfect year for Catalans to get to Wembley or Old Trafford indeed, because with no one there, it might be can't moan about them not selling tickets.
You have to say that.
Toronto would have been a great Challenge Cup final, wouldn't it?
Oh, we'll
see, that's why this programme gets labelled as negative sometimes.
You can't see the face I'm pointing at camera. I should apologise. A, I don't think the Twitch stream's working, so never mind. And B, the person who moaned at me last week for moving my head all the time. So I'm trying to work out what's going on a million different screens. But I apologise for that. You'll have to get some professionals in. We'll get Brian Carney in next week, but I don't know if he'll do it for free or not. That's the Challenge Cup quarter-finals. There was one game in Super League, which I'm assuming neither of you two watched.
No, resorted to listen to it on a radio network.
Oh, no.
I heard Wakefield were absolutely rubbish, if that helps.
Well, I mean, Huddersfield were good. 29-6. The John Smith Stadium. 13-0 down at half-time. In fairness, Wakefield were good for the first 15 minutes. Then everyone started getting injured, and it all fell apart after that. Chris McQueen, the England international, with a try to open the scoring. Kalepi Tangano was the only one for Wakefield in the game. Yeah, Huddersfield were the better side. It's as simple as that.
Good audition. A good audition for Luke Robinson. Clearly, spoke very eloquently afterwards about how he does want the job, and that may well be the direction that Huddersfield decide to go in. If they do, and it would be great to see another young, aspiring English coach in the game, then I hope they actually stand by him for a length of time, so that in 2 years we're not talking about Huddersfield changing their coach again, which sort of has been the practice. I think if he gets the job, and the players seem to be very supportive of him, and I think he'd look to keep this tradition of young players who've been introduced to the side going forward, because obviously he's been instrumental in their development. If he's got the support of the players, then he deserves the support of the management as well, and a 4-year deal really should mean a 4-year deal, unless something major went wrong. Because I think a bit like Hull, what Huddersfield need is stability and a philosophy and a way of playing, and it's not going to work every week, because it never does with any club. But I think if you keep moving away from what you're trying to achieve, then you never achieve it. And if his teams are going to play with the way that they did against Wakefield, who clearly have problems at the moment, and I don't know how they get out of them. I would say that social media can be a a strange place at times, and everybody who feels that they are entitled to whatever opinion they like, and there seems to be a disturbing groundswell of opinion against Chris Chester at the moment. I don't know whether that's justified or not. I just seriously don't know why you'd make a change at coaching level if you didn't have to during a season such as this. I think that if ever there were extenuating circumstances, whatever they may be, this is the year for it. But yeah, there seem to be problems of unity at Wakefield that Luke Robinson doesn't have at the moment at Huddersfield, and that was reflected in the difference between the teams.
We'll talk more about Luke Robinson in a moment. As soon as you brought up the situation at Wakefield, obviously Willie Porchin coming in as assistant at the end of this year, start of next. I remember last year, I can't remember was it the wellness round or state of mind round? It might have been the year before. And I can't remember if it was myself or somebody else who asked Chris Chester about his state of mind in a pre-match press conference, because everyone talks about the players and they're the ones who get all the focus. But as he said, no one talks about the coaches. Everyone's going online and blaming them for the ills of everything at the club. That was a difficult press conference to watch on Thursday after the game. Obviously, Luke Robinson's in there, full of beans, as you would expect, picking up his first grade win. But there was almost a look on Chris Chester's face, which I think we've all seen on coaches before, where you just think they're looking for the answers, John, but not quite sure where they are at the moment. And hopefully you can find them soon.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just briefly go back to what Phil was saying about 4-year deals. Long-term coach, obviously, as a Brisbane fan, he's forgotten about the Seabold nightmare of 5-year deals. But we'll let that one.
You'd have to get the right person if you're going to give them a deal.
Very true. And make sure you give them an extension in their favour so it goes to a 6th year so they can walk away with £900,000. On Chris Chester, Rich, I feel sorry for him. I think he is aspirated. Nothing seems to be changing, and there is a lot of opposition. There's a lot of Wakefield fans out there seemingly who want him gone, who want him sacked. But I mean, when you see that, you kind of go, well, what's the next option? Because you can't just sack a coach and then, it's not smart to sack a coach and then go, okay, we need to find the next coach. You need to have a plan before you take that action. And I think with Wakefield, they did overachieve for a couple of years. What was it, 5th or 6th a couple of times? And obviously last year was probably more of a reflection of where they are in terms of salaries, cap spend, and the resources of the club. And this year's been pretty tough as well. So I think there's probably come a time for some change in terms of the squad and some of the players. But yeah, it definitely is hard for Chris Chester. I think he's a secret Twitter lurker, isn't he? So he's probably seen some of the vitriol that gets aimed at him, which is not nice, but we get plenty of vitriol ourselves, so I guess we know how he feels.
I think the words that he used in his press conference will be the most alarming for the people that are looking at where the club now goes from here. When you start saying same rubbish, different week, and I saw players that looked like they were avoiding making tackles, you're almost backing yourself into a problem when you next go to training. That trust that is essential between player and coaching staff, that clearly there are things that happen on the field in a game that are different to what you go through every week in training together. Some things you can't control. It could be the bounce of a ball or a decision or whatever, and you stick together. But when I think your coach goes into a post-match press conference and starts making perhaps even understandable statements about what he's getting from his guys, then that's a pretty difficult situation to come back from. I would just say that whatever happens at Wakefield, timing has to be everything. If you pay a coach off before the end of his contract, the money isn't there at the moment. If a new coach comes in and he wants to reshape and change the squad, the money isn't there at the moment. We are in really, really difficult times. And the obvious answer is always to say, oh, just get rid of somebody. But it really isn't as easy as that at the moment.
No, I have completely written off this season. which is why, as we said before, this is not a season that is anything approaching normal, as we're playing games all over the place and at weird times, and there's no fans and this and that and the other. We all know the situation. So to me, I'm not interested necessarily in where Wakefield finish this year. If we finish bottom, we finish bottom. If we finish top, we finish top. It's irrelevant, because the most important thing for every single club in Super League and every single club in the game is getting through to next year. We will go back to Luke Robinson in a moment, but we've kind of stumbled onto the coronavirus thing. We're not going to have crowds for the foreseeable future. The test events in October have been, cancelled. We've got the Challenge Cup semi-final is going to be behind closed doors. The final may well be as well. The furlough scheme ends soon. I don't know how that will affect clubs who have got staff and players on furlough, especially those outside of Super League with no incomes coming in. We've got no idea what's going to happen next, have we? And this is the worry for me, John, is well, two things. One, we're all worried about our own health and our wealth and everything. But in terms of the sport, people within it believing in conspiracy theories and publicly stating them is beyond foolish, I think, seeing the situation the sport is in.
Yeah, I don't even want to really touch that, because you just leave the nutters and the conspiracy theorists on their own. It's a tough time for everyone in every walk of life, every industry, and rugby league, as we know, it's run on, in particularly in the UK, it's run on the smell of an oily rag. And probably this pandemic has meant a lot more squeezing of that rag in a lot more areas, and we probably don't even know how bad it is at some clubs, because they're keeping their cards, understandably close to their chest. But people are getting furloughed, and you would think when the furlough stops, there will be people who been getting made redundant or losing their jobs, and obviously players have taken a pay cut. Maybe more pay cuts next year. We just don't know. So yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And I think on the backdrop of that, you've probably got to understand some performances and some things, and be a bit more lenient, as Phil said, a bit more lenient, I think, in perhaps than that you would in a normal season.
I think there's two things that strike me. One is clearly sport is deemed to be an important industry. It brings a lot of money into the economy. There's going to be lobbying now of the government to come up with something to keep it going, in much the same way as the theatre and entertainment industry are saying the same, and I'm sure there are a lot of other industries out there. It lends it to the fact that I suspect furlough is going to have to be extended in some way. That some industries are going to have to be, for want of a better word, protected. And that may well be as a result of this increase in infection rates. It may not have been part of the original government plan, but clearly there is some intense lobbying going on from Premier League football, which is one of the richest sports around, who's claiming to be losing £100 million a month. To Northern League soccer, who is now talking about delaying the start of their season, to ice hockey, I think, who have cancelled their season. We are in and amongst that mix. Where you sit in it depends on clearly what reserves and resources you've got, but there will be some intense political lobbying now to make sport a special case if, as seems likely, crowds are not back in 2020. I think there's something the sport can do. I just think now, if we are of a mind that we will not get a crowd between now and the end of November, which is when the current Super League season is scheduled to end, then I think we have to cancel all midweek games now for the welfare of the players. Those fixtures were backloaded for the advent of crowds, to be able to bring important money into the sport to help the clubs out at this difficult period. If you stage those games now behind closed doors, it's only going to cost clubs money. If you're even looking at Catalan Dragons, who deserve absolutely immense credit for the cost of flying over here already, is it on 4 or 5 occasions? That's going to have cost Bernard Gouache not far short of £250,000. We need to sit back and say, look, if through no fault or planning on behalf of the sport, which has been pretty good from both Super League and the RFL. I wouldn't like to be in their shoes at all. I think they've done almost the best they can do in such changing circumstances, that if we now know there is increasingly less likelihood of a fan being in the ground, let's change the fixtures. If we don't have 20 rounds, if it ends up being 15, we had a game rearranged this week, didn't we? That Wakefield and Leeds are now going to play each other twice in 4 days at the beginning of November. Why do we need to do that? If these games are going to be behind closed doors, and we really do care about player welfare, we really do care about what the sport is going to look like going into 2021, when hopefully, even if we start that season maybe without fans and gradually move to a World Cup where hopefully, grounds start being full again at the end of 2021, then let's make that decision now. And as we've said about the form of a Hull or a Wakefield or even a Warrington or a St Helens, does that really matter? If we can get to a grand final, if we can play it behind closed doors, if we can preserve the players and we can preserve as much of the finances of the clubs as is humanly possible, please let's make that decision. And I would love it if, as Kevin Keegan may have said, if we could make that decision soon. And yes, it's another rearrangement of fixtures, and yes, it would have to be done in concert with our major broadcasting partner, but I still think we can give them the 2 games a week that we're contracted to and not put the players under ridiculous duress.
And on a financial point, we are at that point of the year, if not past it now, where clubs would usually be asking fans to buy their season tickets for next year. And I'm sure there'll be plenty out there who will, happily, as they've done this year, put their money into the clubs and say, take the money. We understand that we might not see games at the start of the season, John, but there's going to be plenty of people, as we said now, because of people losing work and job losses being announced every day, who aren't going to be able to afford to buy season tickets, regardless of whether they want to or not.
Yeah, that's the reality. If it comes between your season ticket and paying your rent, you've got to pay your rent, haven't you? So, yeah, that's where we're at, and I think Phil makes a good point in terms of those fixtures. I mean, to play fixtures just for the sake of playing fixtures, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And player welfare is another thing, like we talked about mental health and perhaps online abuse. Often we can talk a good game, but we need to more follow through and let actions speak louder than words.
So, I mean, we go back to that Huddersfield Wakefield game on Thursday last week, Phil. What was the point of that game then? It wasn't on Sky, so, the vast majority of people who watch Rugby League have probably got a Sky subscription. It was only open to season ticket holders from Wakefield and Huddersfield. However many of those people there are, I don't know. We had to go to the expense of, I'm sure it didn't cost much to have 2 cameras or whatever, but it's still an expense to play out a match which, in reality, we might not need to have played anyway. Was there any real point to that last week? I know that obviously this week the Hull KR Leeds game's in the same situation where we're talking about clubs with a much bigger season ticket base, of course, but what is the point of these games that aren't on TV available for more people? Why didn't we ask people, if you want to watch this game, pay a £5 or whatever? I don't know.
I think the issue is that clearly the goalposts have moved right from the very beginning of this pandemic, and you've got to be agile in the way you respond to it. I think that clearly there was a fixture list drawn up that was as much to suit broadcasters in the beginning as it was anybody else. Understandably, they have taken some money back from next year, and we wanted to give them the best value possible, and that meant playing at single venues. I think that's the other issue for me at the moment. Now, you say, originally week 1 you want a competition that isn't going to be compromised in some way. The minute Toronto withdraw, you've got 11 teams, it's compromised in some way. The minute you go from the number of rounds you originally had scheduled to a different number of rounds, the integrity is compromised. It's nobody's fault, but it is. Therefore, you have license to change things. You then bring in, win percentages, because you can see things are being further compromised down the line. We can change this now. we can look at the fixtures and say we've already given license that not everybody has to play the same amount of games. So let's make provision for the fact that we don't do that. We were going to have test events that were going to open up at least 3 more venues that we haven't played at before. Again, if you were to ask Castleford, Wakefield, teams that haven't staged a game so far at their home ground, do they want to bring people off furlough? Can they afford to do that? Can they afford to open their facility to man it with stewards, even if it's a minimum amount? Whatever they need to do, there is cost involved. And you talk about season ticket holders having to make decisions. Anybody who's bought a season ticket for 2020 will effectively be getting 2021 for free. So that's no more income coming in next year. I just think we've got to look at the whole of the sport and say, between now and the end of November, we've got a couple of major commitments. One is the Challenge Cup final, which is on BBC One, which does guarantee a big exposure. You look at the numbers that'll tune in, it'll be 1 million, 1.5 million people. It normally is for that particular game. It's not going to matter to all intents and purposes that nobody's in the stadium, because we've already seen an FA Cup final with no one in the stadium. That sadly has become the norm at the moment. I can see why you want to get to a position where you might want to play the grand final. Whether you want to hire Old Trafford to do that, again, I'm not sure. But what we need to be doing, I think, in the knowledge of what's happened this week with further restrictions, is put health first, the health of the fans and the welfare of the players, and not economics. Look at it from the other perspective. And if there are games that are scheduled in midweek, if there are matches that will make no material difference to a league table but put teams at greater risk if you force those games to be played, let's not play them. It's an exceptional year. It's happened before in wartime. Let's make some really, really tough decisions now and look ahead rather than just play from week to week.
Let me ask one of my facetious questions, John. With health and economics, 2 of the things that Phil's mentioned there, aren't the powers that be in charge of our sport doing the right thing, saying players can't celebrate for the goodness of their own health and fining them if they are too exuberant?
I don't get the whole logic in the celebration fine. I mean, if you're tackling someone and lying all over them, surely that's as much transmitting as a quick hug or a peck on the cheek or, well, what seems to be the go there, a good squeeze of the jack backers seems to be common. I don't get the celebration. And if they're all in a bubble together, then they're training together, then surely there's no more risks in terms of transfer of the disease. So I don't get that one. But yeah.
Isn't that about communication as well, though, and getting the message out there as to why? Because we don't know if Public Health England have made that decision. We don't know if it's an internal Rugby League decision. But what we do know is nobody seems to know why that decision's been made, including, I think, Steve Price has been the most vociferous and eloquent opponent against it. But if there is a health reason why we shouldn't do it, tell us. Otherwise, it's like closing a pub at 10:01.
No, that's because coronavirus is on night shift, Phil. Coronavirus has got to clock off at 10. That's the rules.
You're as expert virologists as people off Loose Women or some rugby clubs, I see, which is good to see. Luke Robinson, things I said we talk about him, and I got digressed into the COVIDs. Scully says he should get the job in the League Express this week. He's obviously got very experienced people around him in Andy Kelly and Kim Williams. Should he be given a go? Phil's obviously in favour. John, what do you think?
I think he should definitely be given a go. I guess the issue is that he's been at the club a long time, and that club, obviously, they won, I think it was 2013, they won the League Leaders' Shield under Paul Anderson, and that team mostly has been dismantled. I mean, that was 7 years ago. It's mostly been dismantled, but they've underachieved in their history in Super League, and they have a rich owner who spends a lot of money, but they don't really seem to be up there amongst it. So whether they need someone else to come in and kind of rip things up and start anew, it's probably open for debate. They've got a lot of good young players coming through, which is a really positive thing, and I think they need to keep bringing those through and put that focus onto youth and try and build a new culture with those young guys. But look, I think if Robinson can get them firing, in all due respect, beating Wakefield at the moment is probably not the hardest proposition. But, if they can knock off Warrington or St Helens or Wigan in the next couple of weeks, or or one of the top teams, then yeah, and I think he should be given a chance to prove what he can do. But yeah, you would think they would look locally anyway, because of obviously the travel restrictions and also the expense. You would think they would look in the English market, and there are a lot of coaches available. I mean, Brian McDermott might be available in a few days. I mean, Sean Wayne. He hasn't coached England at all, so you can't really argue that he couldn't coach a club team and England at the same time. I mean, he's probably not interested in the Huddersfield job, but I'm just saying that there are quite a few coaches out there, and then there's some in the Championship who'd be very good contenders, like Danny Ward. I think is a fantastic coach. I think James Ford is a fantastic coach as well. So there's no shortage of contenders, I would say. And another one is Lee Radford. I think is proven to be a good coach. Obviously, things didn't end well for him at Hull, but I think he definitely deserves a different start somewhere else. So, yeah, there's a lot of names out there if that's the way they're looking. And from what I understand, they are the short list that they had. Not that I was given any names, but I was told that they're looking, fairly high profile and successful in terms of experienced applicants.
Lee Radford, of course, wasn't sacked on the telly just before anyone mentions that, just to make sure people know that. Well, it was good to see the story. I think it was Gareth Walker in the Mirror, wasn't it, about him still coaching his son's under-6 team at Siddle alongside his role at Huddersfield. And that's the kind of fun story, Phil, that people like these days. That's a good news story for Rugby League. Here's a top-flight coach still getting his hands dirty at the grassroots.
Yeah, I think that sums up Luke Robinson as well. Tells you a lot about his character. I think if you were to perhaps put him together with maybe Chris Thorman, I don't know if Thorman's looking to, be an assistant or a head coach in his own right in his next move, and was starting to do a good job at Workington. But I just think it's about Huddersfield deciding what they want to be, because if they go for a high-profile coach, history would say perhaps an assistant from an NRL club, then he will want to recruit in a certain way. I think what they've got is a core of really good local youngsters who will respond to a Luke Robinson and a Chris Thorman and Andy Kelly perhaps in partnership, and that is the hierarchy that you could bring in that brings a longer, more sustained success. And clearly, yes, you want to bring in big name players. They'll do everything they can to hold on to Aidan Caesar, although you do suspect that the guy who brought him in is now gone, and he's going to be in demand at the higher level of an NRL club. But I just think if Huddersfield decide that local is best, that giving young talent that they have nurtured and now has gained a certain level of Super League experience and has the potential to only get better, can flourish under the scheme that's brought them through, then that's a more important decision than going and getting Newcastle's assistant coach, which they've done on at least 24 occasions.
Look, you've got to get Nathan Brown's seal of approval. That's the main thing. Well, Brownie goes.
Well, we had a couple of questions about the NRL.
I'm not joking.
We had a couple of questions about the NRL from our listeners. Can you talk more about the NRL, says Stephen? Any players you're looking forward to seeing at the World Cup in 2021?
Yes, one in particular. Stephen Crichton. I think he's been absolutely sensational for Penrith this year. 19, centre, saw him for the Australian schoolboys when he came over here. Born in Apia in Samoa. He could be one of the most exciting young players that we see at the World Cup. Watch out for him. And there is a prop whose name I'm going to make a complete mess of at Gold Coast Titans. His surname is Fotuaika. Kiwi. He looks like he could be anything.
Actually.
Right. Well, again,
background, so
could be either. I think was he born in Wellington? But qualifies for either. But again, imagine what he could be in a year's time. So they're two in particular I would look out for.
Yeah, that's a good shout, Phil. I think also at Penrith, Brian To'o, the winger, I think he's played for Samoa. He'll definitely be in there World Cup squad. Big Tino at Melbourne. I think he's a Kiwi.
He's a Kiwi as well, I think. Yeah.
He's a beast. They're going to have him and Nelson Asofa Solomona running at people.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. And then obviously Fiji. I mean, everyone knows. Well, Api Coruscant's been playing for Fiji for a long time, but he's been killing it at Penrith. And then you've got the wingers. Obviously, Micah Sivo at Parramatta is having a huge year. Ravalawa is another one. At St George Illawarra. Who else is there? You put me on the spot there.
Billy Kickow, who we saw at the last World Cup, was just starting to break through.
Villamau.
Billy to me, he looks like he could be one of the best forwards in the world at the moment. And yeah, I think what we are saying is Pacific Island nations are going to be fantastic to watch. That if we can promote it right, the England-Samoa opener, and who knows, and it may even bring Toronto into the conversation, but technically Sonny Bill could be lining up for Samoa in that game, and in terms of a boost that would give to the World Cup would be massive, because just look at the impact Gavin and Henson possibly playing for Wales could have at the World Cup, which is being talked about.
Played the game. Come on.
I know, but it's being talked about, and half of the time he's talking about it and creating a buzz about it. And if he did play in a Rugby League World Cup, it would be big news.
Yeah, it depends how many pints he's probably had the night before. But on Samoa, the squad that Samoa could put together, when you also consider if they can encourage the likes of Tuivasa-Sheck or Asofa Solomona to switch. But even without that, they've got an unbelievable. It's got Jerome Luai at Penrith as well. I think he's Samoan background. I mean, I think more of the issue is the coach, whether Matt Parrish is the right coach for them. I would probably wager, I guess he isn't. But if they could get a Christian Wolf style coach, I think they could emulate Tonga, and they've got the raw talent to do that. And the other one who is a bit of a left field is Campbell Graham at South Sydney, a centre or a winger. Now, I think he born and raised in Sydney, so he's Australian, but his parents are... Sorry, I just had a phone call. Don't know who that was. His parents are Scottish and English, so he's eligible, I believe, for either. So, yeah, if you're Sean Wayne, would you pick him?
I think Scotland have already earmarked him, and he would have already played for them, I think, but for injury. But I just think the fact that we can talk about the World Cup, and tickets went on sale to the Rugby League family, i.e. anybody who'd registered on the website yesterday, and I'm told that the initial feedback is that exceeded expectations. Tickets for every one of the 61 games were bought, and the systems were pushed to their absolute limit for the demand that came through the website. And that is fantastic, because again, when you think that we're in such a precarious place at the moment regarding knowing what's happening tomorrow, never mind in a year and a bit's time, the World Cup organisers have done everything superbly. They've kept to their schedule. They've still got announcements geared up to make as we get to further landmarks like 400 days out, and the public are backing them. It would appear that the big games, the Arsenal game, the game at St James's to open it, the finals, they all had really good sales first day up. So let's talk more about the World Cup. Let's start talking it up now, because that could be the saviour of Rugby League, and is another reason why I would preserve this current domestic season as best as we can now, in the knowledge that we have to make it the biggest and the best it's ever been.
Just to add, to players there, one name I think that definitely worth a mention is Justin Olam at Melbourne, PNG centre. Just hits like a fridge, very powerful, and I think he could make a big splash at the tournament.
And Jerome Hughes, who I think has exceeded expectations, Kiwi halfback that again could really love playing over here, and has looked fantastic in the run to the final stages of the season.
If you look at that New Zealand squad, even just in the halves, they've got Sean Johnson, Cody Nicarima, Jerome Luai, Benji Marshall, the forward pack is the Bromwiches and Surfer Solomona, and they've got
Brandon Smith as well. You can throw in.
Yeah, when he comes back from his jaw issue, they've really got no excuses. I think in this tournament next year to be in the final, if not win the whole thing.
It's just a shame that Ryan Pappenhausen isn't playing for Holland this week.
I'd be wondering if he knew where Holland was, but that might be a bit harsh.
I think it's going well for that New Zealand-Australia final then at Old Trafford coming up next November. I'm being harsh. Come on, Sean Wayne, get them sorted. Come on, the lads. I retweeted something yesterday from Gary on our account. He said, what's needed is all current internationals to tweet ticket details. Look at all the extra exposure. Plenty of people who were involved in the World Cup as ambassadors and such did that, but there is what's the word I'm looking for? Responsibility of the players to do that, isn't there? To get involved and try and make this the biggest and best World Cup ever and all that kind of jazz, and maybe and the clubs as well to retweet these ticket details.
100%. I mean, there needs to be a concerted approach. How many of the Super League clubs did tweet the World Cup ticket details? I mean, I clearly don't follow them every minute of every day, but I just wonder how much exposure the World Cup got from the Super League clubs, because if you add together their combined number of followers, you'd imagine it's probably not far short of a rough guess, 500,000. And they're looking to sell 750,000 tickets in the competition as a whole. So you're going to need the core of fans. Every club, not just Super League clubs, I only mention them because they are actually playing at the moment, but you would have thought that every single professional, semi-professional Rugby League club would have tweeted the World Cup details yesterday. I'm sure some of them did, but I doubt whether every one of them did.
I think I just want to give a rap to the World Cup, the organising committee, and the marketing and communications people, because they've been outstanding in the way they've engaged with the media. I mean, media engagement in Rugby League is kind of a running joke, but they've actually got in touch. Can we suggest a story on this person or that ambassador? They've really pushed the envelope in terms of getting media coverage, and I think they've done a great job so far in the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is, and I'm sure that'll just ramp up more as the tournament comes.
While we've kind of the dog's barking. While we've kind of ended up going on to a tangent again, which we always do. You mentioned media and stuff there. Obviously, I'm a very ancillary part of this thing. The one thing I've noticed over the past few weeks since the return of Rugby League from the lockdown is of the videos I put on YouTube, ones that have done decently for viewers are the post-match press conferences. Now, I have a kind of internal monologue with myself. Should I put these up or not? Am I stealing the work of others in putting them online or whatever? But they get really good views. And I don't know why the Rugby Football League and Super League aren't doing this themselves as the NRL do in putting this content up online, which they've already got. And let's be honest here, since the lockdown, since the return of these matches, the matches are all centralised. They're all being run by Super League and the Rugby Football League. I don't know why they're not running the press conferences themselves rather than relying on the clubs and getting as much access as possible to people out there. I'm only on a certain number of club mailing lists because I'm lazy. Why aren't we just doing things where we can get as much material out to people as possible?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Rich. I think it's probably a combination of a lack of resource and a lack of innovation and ideas. You only have to look on the weekend. The Knights, the Newcastle Knights, Tim Gladsby obviously announced that he was going to retire and talked about concussion. And I've read the quotes, I've not seen the footage, but apparently it was a really sort of emotional but engaging piece of film. And obviously if that hadn't been filmed and been available on the NRL website for anyone and their dog to see, you wouldn't hear about it as much. And that's what we should be doing definitely in Super League. I think that's a given. We're in a stage now where there's less and less journalists, whether they be mainstream or more niche publications, actually at games, and there's not really a lot of interest outside the hardcore Rugby League publications from national media. You can just look at that. If you look at the weekend's papers on Saturday and Sunday, there wasn't much coverage of the Challenge Cup finals, and that's got to be a real worry.
I think Canberra today have put out an 8-minute piece, and clearly, you've got to be pretty committed to watch all of it. But it's basically they wanted to film their team announcement, whereby I think it's 4 players are being given their debut this week, and they filmed the whole thing, including Ricky Stewart saying what an important and significant moment it is in their lives, and it'll never be repeated, it'll never be forgotten. And the debutants themselves had to get up in front of the squad and say what it meant to them. That's human interest. That doesn't have to be a rugby league team. That doesn't have to be, a sport that we would actively look out for. If you're going to make something viral, give it interest beyond what it's actually got. So Tim Glasby making an emotional plea to the end of his career, and let's look at the effects of concussion and the impact that it's had on his life. The videos that we see from the NRL where players are ringing their parents to tell them that they're getting their start, and they're all breaking into we want to see that does create interest beyond the boundaries of the sport. And I think we've spoken about this a couple of times about how do you make players personalities. It's not just necessarily showing the action, it's the stories, the human interest angle behind the stories, and perhaps we need to get smarter and cuter at doing that. But I do understand that at the moment, a hell of a lot of staff are on furlough, and it's just difficult to get the bog standard stuff out there. But some clubs do brilliantly with just, taking a camera around training areas, short little snappy bits, and not necessarily formal interviews, but some little highlights of skills and things. The Gold Coast Titans did it the other week with Justin Holbrook kicking a goal from was it the touch line from halfway, and all the squad watching him, and all he did was just doff his cap to them. And actually that for 30 seconds you don't need a commentary. It's just a good fun piece of footage out there that will get you a bigger audience than just those that follow the club.
And just further on that, I think a good example is the Brian McDermott interview with Brian Carney from a week and a half ago.
100%.
That was sort of promoted beforehand and during the game, but it actually only came in the last 10 minutes of the broadcast at 10 o'clock or whatever it was. So the audience who actually would have been watching that live would have been quite small, but they went and put that footage online on social media. And I know when I saw it come out, I think it was at 70,000, 80,000 views the next day. I don't know how many it's on now, but that was riveting television, and that was a story that needed to be explored. And you've got to try and share that around and make it more viral.
On Gold Coast, because you've mentioned them, we had a message from John. He said, what's achievable for them next season?
Playoffs for sure. I think not only has Justin Holbrook proved that he is a very good coach with whatever resource you give him, but he's going to start having his own team next year. Some of the recruitment is massive, and that's just the other David Fafita, who could be anything. But clearly Holbrook is is not only a very talented coach, as we saw here, but has the ability to create a culture, whatever that means. And I know we had a laugh with Scoey about it. Why is he going from the top team in Super League to the bottom team in the NRL? Because he's just a good coach and he can make players better. And I think that he's already proved this year that he's got what it takes to coach in the NRL. I think now with his own players around him, with his own way of doing things within the club for a year, they genuinely are top 8 contenders next year for absolute sure, and may even better than that. Yeah,
spot on what Phil said. I thought they'd be better this year than they were last year. They've probably exceeded that, and with Tino and Fafita and Herman Essa, they've got a massive forward pack there, and he's not only a very good coach, Justin Holbrook, but a nice guy. So it's good to see him doing well. And I thought the outcry in Australia, which was quite funny when he got the job and Kevin Walters didn't, was just sort of a reflection of the agendas that you often see. Because Kevin Walters works for Fox League and's got a lot of mates. He's a nice guy apparently as well, but he's got a lot of mates in the media. But I think it just goes to show that Holbrook had the runs on the board, not only as an assistant in the NRL, but the success he had with St Helens, and he's just continued that on. So I think the Gold Coast, they've never won anything in their history, so it's quite a good good news story to see them improving and getting better, and hopefully, just continuing that upward journey.
Gold Coast, of course, an expansion team. And speaking of expansion team, it's time to talk about everyone's favourite, Canadians. Here's Yatesy. How can the clubs make a fair, unbiased decision on Toronto when they're directly affected in the decision they make? Does anyone in a position of power actually make decisions in rugby league? One assumes that. Yes, I believe it's Daniel, actually, a Bulls fan. He's talking about rugby league in the Northern Hemisphere rather than the Southern Hemisphere. It was the decision this week, next week. It's coming up anyway. And the GMB, fair play to them. This is one of the greatest plays ever seen in the history of sport, isn't it? The big high bomb spiraling up saying, well, we haven't paid the players and everything, but we'll make sure they get paid if we're allowed in the competition next year. Brilliant piece of work from the unions there. It's like going back in time. Do you think they'll have any bearing on the decision, John?
That really badly worded press release. Look, it's a compelling argument that let us back in so we can pay the players and the staff what they're owed. Otherwise, they won't get paid. I mean, you'd be pretty heartless not to think of that. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of evidence of David Argyle saying, "I'll honour my obligations," which obviously shows what his promises are worth. Nothing. But just on the bit, no, it's probably not. It's not fair that the clubs get to make the decision. But that's where we're at. I mean, we probably do need a commission in this country. I thought about writing a piece along those lines. You could have a commission of people running the game who aren't kind of connected to certain clubs. I'd nominate Mr. Kaplan. I think he'd be a good commissioner. There's a few other people I'd suggest, but there's massive conflicts of interest there, just like there is all across rugby league. Like when you have Eric Perez, chairman of Bradford, while he's running Ottawa, and other such instances. Mark Sawyer running Bradford while he owns Dewsbury. Should I keep going on?
I think strip this back. There's a bigger issue at play here. Toronto are the latest manifestation of expansion. We're 125 years into the sport, and we don't really know what we mean by expansion. So now is a very good time, probably 124 years too late, to decide what goes with expansion, what resource goes with it, does relegation go with it, does the future shape of the sport go with it, all of those issues that we tend to either fudge or decide as we go along. Now is a very good time to set out a template. The other thing that seems to be going on in the background, and clearly I am not a news journalist, it's what you pick up sometimes from just nuances when you speak to people, but who actually does make this decision? A lot of conjecture is that it's going to be the other clubs in Super League that are going to decide the fate of someone coming into Super League. From what I can gather, and I haven't seen the agreement between the RFL and Super League that allowed Super League to exist as a separate organisation, the decision rests with the RFL, that they have enshrined the idea of promotion relegation, but the Super League have agreed to that, but not over which clubs can or can't be promoted. So I think there's been a lot of lobbying going on over the weekend about who finally makes the decision on Toronto. And it seems to be that the RFL are in favour of them coming back, that they can see the benefit of 12 clubs. I think we need to get away from the idea of due diligence, because clearly Carlo Livolsi would pass any due diligence test compared to most, if not all, of the owners who currently own Super League clubs. Somebody having wealth, which is effectively all that a due diligence test is, rather than how they're going to behave or how they're going to use that wealth somewhere down the line, is a very different issue. And no sport can control that. So, the one thing about David Argyle is he clearly had wealth. He clearly put £17 million of his own money into a sports club. He was the right man at the time when that bid was made to be given due diligence. If Andrew Chalmers was given due diligence, then Carlo Livolsi passes a test of due diligence. If you're going to look at his business record, which you can do even sketchily with the companies that he owns and how they're doing on respective markets, he passes. So I don't think him producing a business plan is as much of an issue as it's being made out to be. He is wealthy. He can fund that club if he is in Super League, which I think is his major demand. Now, whether he gets money as part of the television contract, that's for the game to decide, because it's got to decide what it means by expansion. I think there's a political storm brewing between who will make this decision. Is it the RFL, who I think do back Toronto coming back with some assurances? Is it Super League, some of whose members do not want Toronto back because of the expediency of their position? I think it's got a fair way to go yet, and it's not quite as simple as a vote of Super League clubs.
The plot thickens. Here's nom de plume. Beyond the basic yes-no discussion about Toronto, what about the ramifications of a no vote? What happens next with Ottawa? Mini licensing. Who pays the creditors? Well, you know, they're a Canadian business. It's not relevant to us who pays their creditors. But what happens if whoever makes the decision says, that's your lot, Toronto, you're out?
It goes back to what we've just been saying. What do we want from expansion? You know, I can't add a lot more other than the fact that the game needs to decide where it wants to be. Does it want to exploit the North American market for the future? Is Toronto the vehicle to do that? What's the point of bringing in other clubs if they're not there to do that? Does the top flight of rugby league in this country want to try and develop into new markets? If it does, under what conditions can that be successful? And that's why I think, you know, debates about yes or no are virtually irrelevant. It's a wider debate about, particularly in the current economic climate, how does rugby league come out of this? You know, there's going to be some pretty well-known names in football that are going to really struggle if crowds don't come back in. We keep equating ourselves to Scottish football. You know, we don't have a huge amount of resource. If we are to, unfortunately, run the risk of losing some traditional names through no fault of anything other than the current economic climate and the deindustrialisation of the north of England, where the sport is at its strongest, how do you replace that? If your roots start dying off in your garden, where do you plant new trees?
Brisbane, apparently, with their new boutique stadium.
Moreton Bay Bugs.
Used to see.
I bet Jones had a Moreton Bay bug.
No.
What else have we got here? A Huddersfield Giants, just one of them, not happy with the way things went last Thursday in terms of the logging on to watch the game, because someone pressed the wrong button and made it Wakefield versus Hull rather than Wakefield versus Huddersfield. Huddersfield fans missed most of the first half or something. At least you got to see the best bits. Huddersfield Giant. Hopefully that won't be the case on Thursday. As Sid says, scheduling, we had no rugby league yesterday on Sunday, but a game plan for Thursday afternoon. How are those working? Supposed to watch Hull KR batter Leeds. You might not have seen this email on YouTube because it's come out while we've been on air recording this. Obviously with no crowds next week, or no crowds being allowed in the next week or so for the pilot. Huddersfield versus Huddersfield and Leeds versus Catalans, which were due to have supporters, are going to be played without, but at same venues, but only streamed on the Our League app. Next Thursday, 1st of October, Castle versus Hull will be on the Mendoza Hull, so a new venue for us to watch matches from. And Tuesday's games will both be on Sky as well. Salford Warrington, which wasn't going to have a crowd, if I remember correctly, and Wigan versus St Helens, so the traditional derby game being played at the AJ Bell next Tuesday. These games on the Our League app, though, without crowds, I'm assuming there's some issue where we can't charge people to watch them who are not supporters of either club. There must be some rights issue or something, because it doesn't seem to make sense not to try and make some money on the back of these fixtures.
Yeah, I don't have the answers for you there, Rich. I would imagine so, unless it's sort of a thinking that, everyone's a bit cash strapped at the moment. We don't want to take any more money out of people's pockets, which would think would be unlikely, but it's possible.
Have you got your code ready, Phil, for Thursday?
I didn't know I needed one, to be honest, but not yet. No, I shall be, of course, listening to the wonderful commentary on TalkSport 2 with somebody called Mark Wilson, apparently.
TV's Mark Wilson?
TV's famous Mark Wilson.
Did Scully hear Barry McDermott use the phrase vision and awareness, by the way?
I think he may well have slipped that in somewhat deliberately, knowing Barry.
People don't realise that broadcasting's all about, yes, you're getting your message out to everyone, but there's a lot of this is just messages to yourself and people you know. But I want to accuse Barry of that, obviously, because he's on proper telly and everything. We'll talk about those games in a minute. Gareth, I think this is the last question we'll take, an interesting one. QPR in the news at the weekend because they didn't take a knee or whatever the thing is in football and were pilloried by the media. But Les Ferdinand yesterday making a statement saying, we want actions and not things that are just going to become, a badge of honour or whatever, which I think is kind of the point I was making a few weeks ago in a clumsier way. We still got these demonstrations of support before matches, John, but they do seem to be turning into, well, some people are kneeling, some are stood up, some are doing this, some are doing that. There doesn't seem to be any uniformity at the minute. I know there's a big controversial article in the controversial vote in the League Express the other week, and I should say congratulations, Phil, on your Tweet of the Week award.
Did I?
Yeah, you won Tweet of the Week.
What do I win? What do I win?
Supply of oxygen. I think you get a signed copy of one of the cartoons they put in. Decision on whether to readmit Toronto Wolfpack is not principally about the club, but the latest manifestation about how the big words here, Phil, about how the sport should be run and who is empowered to make that call. The Super League board brackets a marketing organisation, which they put with a Z in there, which obviously is the wrong spelling. Or the RFL, the brackets, the governing body, lots of politicking behind the scenes. Rugby League writer and podcaster Phil Kaplan. That's here. They don't mention what podcast it is, though. But
I thought you were an editor, Phil. Have you been sacked?
Yeah, made myself redundant.
We are still, obviously we want action to be taken going forward with the Black Lives Matter movement and issues of racism in rugby league, and there will come a point where people stop taking a knee in all sports, and we have to actually back those words up with action, which as we understand will happen.
Yeah, I think there is a plan for one of the remaining rounds to be an anti-racism round. I think the sport, again, just how it moves forward, as indeed society does. The danger is that something that is very, very important and significant does just become gesture. Clearly, I think he equates to the clap for the NHS. That the woman who came up with that said after a certain amount of time it was losing its impact. So it went out on a high. I'm not sure that's right. I think it's all too easy to forget the contribution of people if you do that. But I think you do need to decide what the next thing is to keep it in the public eye, but also as a sport, what you intend to do off the back of it.
Which hopefully will be something positive, as you say. We'll see how that goes as time goes on. Is there anything else in the news that I've completely missed?
Well, there will be, because there is every week, but
nothing happened at the disciplinary this week, and no one grabbed anyone by the testicles. So
it was a little bite, but I believe he got off for the bite.
Yeah, there was no bite in the end. Oh, Sam Burgess might be back.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Yeah. Don't tell the insurance company that paid him out millions.
We'll move on.
Told you he was coming to Leeds. Nobody believed me.
Is he going to do one of those sports
for a holiday?
Yeah.
Not to play.
Guest of honour somewhere. Let's move on to the predictions. Starting on Thursday with a game that only Phil's going to end up watching. It's Hull KR versus Leeds, and a repeat of a game we've just seen. Phil, how's this one going to go?
I think it'll be closer than the cup tie. There's some fresh blood coming into the Rovers squad. Tony Smith has said, including a youngster called Will Tate, who's got some great raps over in the club. I think Jimmy Kinehorse may even play against his old club. So I think that there will be a reaction. Tony Smith prides himself on that, and his teams tend to have some kind of a response when they haven't lived up to their potential. But I think there's something about Leeds at the moment. There's a grittiness about them, and they can see prizes in both of the competitions. Semi-finally. They know they need to play well. The bulk of the squad is fit. There's some selection choices which every coach will tell you that they want. So I think Leeds will win, but not by the same margin that they did this week.
Yeah, I think with injuries to Ethan Ryan and Will Dagger, they just keep mounting up for Hull KR. I can't see anything but a Leeds win by, I'd say, 14.
Yeah, I'm going to go Leeds again. I'll go Leeds by 8 again, just for the want of balance. I'm going to enjoy this on Thursday because you've got 5 teams going over the M62 from Yorkshire to Warrington, so avoid the M62 as ever. That Hull KR versus Leeds game is followed by Hull FC versus Salford, John.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think Hull FC would be looking to right some wrongs from the weekend, but yeah, Salford. I think it just there's something about them when they're on song, and they do seem to be building at the moment. I think Salford by 8.
I think Salford will take a lot from the manner of their performance against Catalan, the way they hung in there. And this is, I think, the start of building up to that semi-final, which is the following week. I just don't know where Hull are at the moment. As you say, some talented players, but a serious ingredient is missing. Whether that's team spirit, togetherness, I'm really not sure. I'm going to go Salford by 8.
Hull are wonderfully unpredictable, aren't they? But Salford, off the back of that win last week, go for them by 10, and that's followed by an all West Yorkshire class as Castleford take on Huddersfield. Darrell Powell versus Luke Robinson, 2 different eras of halfbacks. Phil, who's going to be on top in this one?
I think this is a really good test for Luke Robinson. As we said earlier in the programme, beating Wakefield at the moment probably doesn't give you an indication of where you are as a team. So he'll want this test. Cassu've had a week off, coming back from a very disappointing cup loss. Their season's on the line in many respects. Darrell's been talking them up, saying we're a top 4 team. Well, they've got to beat Huddersfield to prove that they are. I just think there is a bounce factor with Luke Robinson. Michael Lawrence coming out saying, and I think I'm going to go for Huddersfield by 4.
Yeah, I think it's quite tough because Castleford have just had no luck. It seems since the end of lockdown, they've been quite competitive in a few games, but not managing to get the job done. But I'm gonna stick with them and think that the penny will drop and Castleford by 4.
Yeah, despite Cass having the week off, I'll go with Huddersfield as well in that one. Huddersfield by 2. Then we move on to Friday. 2 games on Friday night. Warrington at home to Catalans, John, first of all.
Yeah, I've really been impressed by Warrington. the last probably 6 weeks or so. They just the new rules seem to suit them. They're playing less structured. They've got players like Mike Cooper and Austin who are just in really, really good form. The squad depth is paying off as well. And Catalans, they were looking good a couple of weeks ago, and then they've sort of had that long break and lost really any momentum, it seems. So I think Warrington by 12.
Come on, Phil, here's your opportunity to upset the Warrington fans again.
He hates them.
Yeah, no, I do think Warrington have hit a groove whereby clearly they are the best team in the competition at the moment, and Catalan having to travel back over here again with the disappointment of being knocked out of a competition that I think they felt they had a very good chance of winning for the second time in 3 years. I think that will have an impact, and there is a real confidence flowing through Warrington and competition for places, and that is going to be key in this season of all seasons. So I'm going Warrington by 4, despite clearly never ever giving them any credit.
Of course, I think it was very difficult last week against St Helens, and as we said in the preview, it was difficult not to want to go for Warrington because of how well they've played. This week it's easier. Warrington by 6, and the weekend ends over here at least with Wigan versus Wakefield, Phil.
Yeah, again, I'd really like to offer you some solace, Rich, that we end the programme on a high and that you go off singing and dancing and opening dandelion and burdock in the fridge to your heart's content. But I can only sadly see beating for Wakefield. They're at a point, I think, where the season end, whatever shape it looks at, cannot come soon enough. It doesn't appear from the outside, and I have no reason to know anything. It just doesn't appear to be a happy-ish camp. Whereas Wigan, I think, on the other hand, are going on an upward spiral. And again, I think the teams that have got the Challenge Cup semi-final to build for will need to put down a marker. And I have a horrible feeling that this could be another Wigan win by 24 points or more. I say a horrible feeling. Obviously, on your behalf, I have no feelings one way or the other whether that's horrible or not. I mean, good luck to Wigan if that indeed is the case.
Rich, can you confirm that they've found some smaller
GPS boxes?
Yes.
Well, he's back, so I assume that's all sorted.
Right, so they're nice. Yeah, some small ones, some ones that feel nice when you put them on. Even with that, Wigan, I think they're in fine touch at the moment. They're looking confident. So many attacking threats with French and Hastings and Gildart, Powell at hooker. I think Wigan by, I'm going to say 22. Close game.
I'll go Wakefield because I do always. Wakefield by 4. David Fafita trying. We didn't mention Gary Henson, did we? He signed for West Wales, which is going to be.
We mentioned him briefly when we were previewing the World Cup.
Bit bizarre.
Yeah, it's just it came completely out of left field, as they say. Didn't expect that one, and we'll see how he does. It did give me an opportunity to go back and look at my tweets about him when he was, famous and stuff, and I may have said some unkind things about him being a publicity seeker and stuff, but
he's 38 years old. 38 years old.
I know that Raiders tried to sign him when he was playing for the British Lions, and I think at the time it was generally accepted that he had a lot of attributes that would suit rugby league. I think he's saying the right things, that it's something he's always wanted to try and test himself at. I think the fact that he's playing at League One level is a real boost for that competition, because you can imagine that, should he make his debut, that it's going to be a Dwayne Chambers moment at Cast. All the media that wouldn't normally follow rugby league is going to be there, and that can only be a thing. And if he does prove to be half decent, I think John Kieran has come out and said, of course Wales would consider him. And again, I just see that as a boost to the sport at the moment. It goes back to what we were all saying about clips like that transcend a rugby league audience, and great, it's a news story that deserves wider coverage.
And let's hope by the time he does make his West Wales debut that fans are allowed back in, and the Raiders can make a few quid off the back of him as well. John, how many podcasts have you got coming out this week?
52.
52. Oh,
Every time I put Twitter on, John's on a podcast.
Jeez, jealousy, fellas.
No.
We like it.
This was your opportunity to promote them all.
Yes, well, there's obviously 6 to go. Was out yesterday with the Harris Chief Paul Bennett, analysing the round of action. And by the balls we recently had on Jodie Cunningham, who's obviously the England and St Helens fullback, and talking about the World Cup and the rise of women's rugby league and challenges and prejudice and success and giving up a medical career to play rugby league. So yeah, that's out there as well. If you would so be interested, please download and listen on your podcast providers.
Good to see all the Aussie women's sevens union players being signed up by the NRL in some kind of cross-code extravaganza for the NRL women's competition coming up soon.
Yes.
Well, I've seen one anyway. I don't know. I don't know anything about
Charlotte Caslick, who they won Olympic gold in Rio. Of course, she signed for the Roosters because they have no salary cap. But no, it's. I mean, I think if you're particularly in Australia and New Zealand, if you're a female rugby union seven, they're in the Olympics. But the NRLW, the women's competition, and the kind of competition between the Gillaroos and the Silver Ferns is going strength to strength. And, the state of origin is also, it's really growing. So I think you'd want to be a part of that.
The new issue of Forty20 is out now, as we mentioned last week. I have it in my hands right now. Phil can't see this because my camera's not working. But only some of my jokes have made it into the column. Jokes in inverted commas, but the best ones, it has to be said. So that's good. What's your favourite bit of the magazine this month, Phil?
Oh, that's like asking to choose your favourite child. You can't possibly do that. Hopefully, from cover to cover, it's a riveting read. Indeed, with lots of things to think about. Yeah, I mean, there are some features in there that I think we're trying to produce. If you like, the record of how coronavirus has treated rugby league and sport in the wider context. And I think, we've said it before, that hopefully at some point when you can look back on this as a period in time, there is a record of what the sport had to go through and how it emerged. What is interesting is clearly we're featuring a lot of Professor Tony Collins in his new book at the moment, but he's optimistic about the future. And if anybody would have that historical context of what the sport has been through over 125 years, if he can come out at the end and say, actually, maybe some good could come of this, then I think there's hope for all of us in that. I mean, we did have a review on Apple Podcasts this morning, or this week rather, which said, too much moaning and negativity, 3 stars. Still got 3 stars though, which is good. I'm hoping that today's show hasn't been that much moaning and negativity. I know we had to talk about the COVIDs and whatever, but I think we've been fairly positive all the way through for a change. It will never last.
Can we have it as a hashtag, Rich?
I think that's already been taken. Oh, that one, yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
Or hashtag a little bit positive.
A little bit positive. Apologies to all. Well, it's not like being a little bit pregnant, that kind of stuff. Apologies to all those who wanted to watch on Twitch because I couldn't get it to work. I just give up now. We'll do it live again when we're back in the shop, back all together in the real world. But that might be a long time to come now. Phil, thank you very much. John, thanks for your time as ever. And we'll see you all again soon here on Forty20. Insert word here live.